It doesn't matter how fast you're going if you're going in the wrong direction. And a lot of people who care about personal development, mental hygiene, how they're living their lives, have been seduced into thinking they have to go faster, they have to hustle harder.
Expanding possibilities, the mindset zone.
I'm your host, Anna Melikian. I'm here to support you, increase your impact while preventing burnout. The Mindset Zone is a place to pause, increase your self-awareness, and embrace the experimentation mindset. Find more resources, including information about the Mindset Zone book and audiobook at mindset.zone. Yes, instead of .com is .zone. Today, our special guest is Seth Godin. Seth is the author of more than 20 worldwide bestsellers books on trust, respect, art, and marketing, and I have read a few of them, namely classics like The Purple Cow and others like Permission Marketing. And I also love Lipspin and It's Your Turn and Tribe. So I'm very, very thrilled of having this conversation today here with him. So welcome to the Mindset Zone, Seth.
Thanks for having me, and thank you for showing up the way you do. It helps a lot of people.
Yes, and you are launching your new book. This is Strategy, Make Better Plans. Why this book now?
It doesn't matter how fast you're going if you're going in the wrong direction. And a lot of people who care about personal development, mental hygiene, how they're living their lives, have been seduced into thinking they have to go faster, they have to hustle harder, they have to try. But maybe it's not in service of the work we seek to do, and maybe we're working against invisible systems that are holding us back. And if we can see those systems, name them, talk about them, perhaps we could achieve more of what we seek.
Love this because I think this is so timely. That answers my big question, why now? Because nowadays everybody's speaking about artificial intelligence and how it's
Mm-hmm.
changing the world that we live in. And something that you said that I think is so timely is that is this at least perception of the acceleration of change and the technology evolution, and everybody's running fast, fast, fast. These tools are allowing us to do more things. Great. So we can be more productive. Wonderful. And everybody's running faster. But if we are running faster to the wrong place, that is not a good thing.
Well said. And also, if we're not using AI, AI is using us. If we're not using the system is using us. And I think the future is loaded with possibilities if we put it to work for us. But if we're going to surrender and be a cog in some marketing machine, that's not going to be fun.
And exercising our muscles, so to speak, in strategy and doing better plans can give us an advantage in this changing world. So explain a little bit for our listeners why is more important than ever being good in this thing that you are calling strategy.
One thing that makes a surfer a better surfer is they pick better waves. And the waves are the system. So let's talk about systems for a minute. A simple system to understand is the solar system. The Earth goes around the sun, not because it wants to, but because of gravity. The wedding industrial complex is a system. How much should your wedding cost? The answer is exactly as much as my best friend's plus a little extra, right? That there's all of these forces at work that we take for granted, but it didn't used to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. But the forces of how we connect change what we think of as normal, what the expectations are. You can't simply abandon a system. The pressures are too great. But once you see it, you can say, oh, this is what the system wants. So here's how I can dance and help me get what I want. And people I know who have worn themselves out pushing against something that cannot be changed, that oppositional behavior, that's a little bit on intent, that on purpose, that we know the system's just going to keep letting us rail against it. Like the person who stands in front of a bureaucracy and protests every day for 2 years. That choice to push back in the wrong spot will define your days, but you could be way better off pushing in a different spot.
Yes. Knowing the leverage points that make the difference.
Exactly.
And I think because mainly in our Western world, we are the worldview and the way that we are raised, educated, the cultural paradigms are so individualistic that we resist a little bit of the system can determine or can influence what we do. We resist to
Yes.
that thought.
Yes. So let's just take a little aside here and talk about cowboys. Cowboys who are supposedly so independent, they all dressed the same. They all did the same sort of work. They all got paid about the same. And the minute the farmer started putting up fences, they were out of luck. And then the most famous cowboy, the Marlboro Man, was invented by a marketing industrial system to trick us into thinking that smoking the same cigarettes as everybody else would be a way of showing that we were independent. And so it's buried way deep in our culture.
Absolutely. And one fascinating thing, you spoke about surfing and the system, because one of the metaphors that I use now with the AI disruption when I speak about this is like, I don't know if this is going to be the exponential growth forever and the singular point, like some of the experts are speaking. But one thing I'm sure, this is 100-foot wave
Mm-hmm.
coming, and
Yes.
we can see it coming. That we can agree with. And that takes me to my country of origin, that is Portugal, where we have the 100-foot waves
Yeah.
near Lisbon, the capital of Portugal. And an interesting thing, there is a beautiful documentary about the 100-foot wave, is that we usually think about surfing as a one-person sport, a one-person activity. But if we see that documentary about the 100-foot wave, is a team sport.
Correct.
You cannot do it alone. Yes, there is that brave, maybe crazy person that is surfing the wave, let's be honest. But they have the spotters that are next to the lighthouse to spot the right wave to be surfed. They have the jet skis that are taking them to the right position. They have the team if things don't go well, to be there to be able to rescue them. So it's really a team sport that has to have a strategy. It has to have a good plan. And we have to be taking in consideration all these different elements that create complexity. So, because you have this rich experience in business and in business world for several decades, from the internet boom, you had a business before the internet was a thing. Tell us, how can we leverage the right strategy and the right planning to be able to surf this 100-foot wave?
Oh, Anna, this is a great question. I think we have to begin inside and say to ourselves, what is the change I seek to make? When I am of service, who will I be of service to? Does that person I'm trying to help want the change that I want? Because if I can create value for someone who has money to spend to solve their problem, they will happily spend it, right? And so creating the conditions for the right people to know that I can offer them the connection, the solace, the dignity, the productivity that they seek, that informs where I'm even going to begin to unfold my strategy. And too often we give up our agency and we say, I will help whoever says hello. I will take whatever money people said. I will take whatever job I can get. If you give up that agency, you're not responsible. So that feels good in the short run. But in the long run, you've sacrificed your most valuable thing, which is tomorrow.
Human beings are fascinating because, yes, we like to be Other people taking care of us feels good, but at the same time, we love our autonomy and be
Hmm.
able to determine who we are. So there is always these kind of different forces that pull us. And yes, if we let our agency go, can have that short-term pleasure, but then we don't like it long term.
Right.
And you are telling, as a business owner, as an employee, as a person in this world, we have to do this inner work of asking the hard questions. Is this really the direction that we want to go
Yes.
before start running?
Right. So when the world changes, I call this a change agent. The system fights it, and then the system gives up and the world changes. And if you show up when a system is changing, you have huge opportunities. So your brilliant podcast has been downloaded more than 1 million times. You started it when podcasting enabled someone like you who didn't have a huge following to begin. It's too late for most people to start a podcast today. The door is only open because radio was buffeted by the winds of change. They didn't want to move forward. People like you showed up and said, "Here I am." So AI is going to be another change agent. Industry after industry is going to be disrupted by this thing. And when that industry is disrupted, who will be bold enough and generous enough to show up and say, "I'm going to fill that slot. I'm going to help here."
I love this example because, yes, systems, and is one of the reasons that they exist to be more effective, to make things work, have this tendency to homeostasis, to keep what is going on
Right.
going. But there are these disruptions that happen that the system has to adapt, and they are also huge opportunities. Of course, when I started Mindset Zone 10 years ago, was one of that moments that the medium of podcasting was starting. For an independent indie person like me, was ideal to establish myself as a podcaster. Somebody starting nowadays with so many big players is much more difficult. Now, AI, these tools and the power of the tools that are now that most people can use is incredible. There is like a leveling the field because there were
Yes.
very powerful tools before, and even in machine learning, that is since the 50s, there was machine learning, and even in research. But I remember that you had to have specific computers with certain power that only institutions could afford to have. Now, with our own computer and a good internet connection, we have access to all of this. Any business has access to all of this. The system is changing. There is this disruption. So it's a huge opportunity. But again, I think we go back to what you were speaking before. We have to do an internal work to make sure that we are pulling the right leverage for ourselves and for the things that we want to do.
Exactly. When photography came along, most painters said, "This is the devil's work. I want nothing to do with it." Some artists announced, "I'm going to be a photographer," right? That when AI comes along, it means two people in their spare time can start a software company that used to cost $10 million to start. Is everyone going to do that? No. Who is? What are they leaning into and why are they doing it? When we see these changes, big and small, we have to decide, am I willing to adopt a mindset of responsibility? And it's interesting because some of the people you've talked to over the years are on the outside edges of the medical industrial complex. And the medical industrial complex doesn't make health, it makes treatments because
Mm.
that's what it gets rewarded for. And someone shows up and says, "Well, I have this elixir or this mindset or this book that will help people get better." And the medical establishment can't embrace that because it's not a treatment that they are authorized or understand. But now that it's shifting, there are ways for people to show up. Do you care enough? Can you visualize how you could build a system next to that system to deliver an entire solution to people? Or is it more fun to be a gadfly and to be rejected and to be around the edges? These are choices.
Yes, and in the health system, or you say there is Amazon is trying to play a role on it. That is fascinating to see how a big system can resist the change, even of another big player, and how innovation can play a role on this, and how we can absorb or not the new ideas. And going back to the AI, because yes, other technology advances that happen, other people always complain saying that this is the end of the world and
Hmm.
then the world keeps spinning. Even when the technology literally can destroy the world, I think about nuclear energy that absolutely has the potential to destroy the world, but thank God we are still here. And some guardrails were managed to be put in place. And at the same time, AI will have the challenges and will have the also very bad potential. But one dynamic that I find very interesting with AI is that mainly with the generative AI and all these new tools that are emerging, that we have access to it, is putting interrogation marks around what we consider to be uniquely human
Hmm.
and
Yes.
threaten our core beliefs about our identity.
Which is fascinating. As someone who is right in the crosshairs of some of the things AI can do, I don't feel that way. Like if I'm driving on a road and the road was made by a steam shovel and a bulldozer, it doesn't feel like a better or worse, it doesn't feel like a worse road than one that was made by people, right?
Mhm.
That the Rolls Royce used to be made by hand, and a Toyota built by a robot is a better car. So
Yes.
if I am reading a book and it is explaining something to me in a way that works for me, I don't care if it was written by a ghostwriter, by 7 people, or by an AI. Dan Dennett, my late philosophy professor, calls this the intentional stance. The intentional stance is our shortcut for interpreting what something is doing. So if a dog snarls at us, we say, the dog is angry that you took away his bone. Well, no, the dog doesn't have a word for angry and the dog doesn't have a dialogue. It's just easier to imagine what will happen next if we give it an agency, right? And the same thing is true with Claude.ai or ChatGPT. It says something, and even the people who program it aren't saying to themselves, oh, it's just ones and zeros, it has no idea. They interpret it as if there's a little person inside. And so if there's a beautiful piece of jazz I'm listening to, I'm not going to spend a lot of time wondering if it was improv or if it's pre written, if it's a cover song. It's just beautiful.
Yes, and the Turing test that
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning, of the say of machine learning was put as, okay, do we know if we are speaking or interacting with a machine, or we cannot discern that is a machine or another human? Now is putting to the test, so to
Yes,
speak, because
exactly.
we really don't know if something is generated by these things, large language models, or another human being. And that is disconcerting for many people.
It is for a little while. We have seen over time, if I announced to everyone on an airplane, the autopilot is flying the airplane now, people might be momentarily upset. But the fact is, the autopilot's better at flying the airplane. And that's what's been going on your whole life. You just didn't know it.
Yes.
So it's going to be disconcerting until it's not. And I think, in particular, one of the bright line moments is going to be when everyone has a psychologist in their ear that can give them 5 minutes of therapy a day.
Yeah.
Because not for people who have profound mental illness, but for people who would benefit from a little CBT, who would benefit from a little mindfulness, we're going to be fine with that 3 days after we start doing it.
And this takes us to back to strategy and make better plans.
Right.
Because if we use these tools to uh, become better human beings and grow, do that self growth that is so important. Because I think what is happening is that we are reacting. to all these new things
Hmm.
that we don't know where to put. We don't have a box yet to
Right.
put them. So we react. It's like putting the head on the sand or trying to control everything. So we have all these defense mechanisms that we try to react when we know that in terms of strategy, better than reacting is to respond with a plan
Beautifully
that can be
said.
changeable, but it is more effective and can create a bigger impact.
Beautifully said. A short way is to ask ourselves this over and over again but is it helping? That you just spent all this time and money on some snake oil. Okay, but is it helping? You are having a tantrum about something because you're upset. Yeah, but is it helping? And when AI shows up in our world, you can use it or not use it. If you choose not to use it, is it helping? And in order to have an answer to helping, we have to know what we're trying to do. Why are we here? What's our goal? What's our point?
So is that why? Because I noticed that this book, you structure it in an unconventional way. It's not
Mm-hmm.
a typical book with part one, part two, chapter, blah, blah. You have like little bites
Mm-hmm.
numbered so we can go back to that specific area. Is this a way of creating like a brainstorming around this? What is the connection here?
I'm trying to create a conversation around it. What's the purpose of the DSM, the big, thick book
Yeah.
of psychological maladies? It's so one psychologist, when they're talking to another psychologist, can reference the same idea. So the idea is if you're on Article 158 and you're talking to someone who's a colleague, you say, let's talk about that one. It doesn't matter whether they have the audio book or the Kindle or the print book. You all know which one 158 is. So I'm trying to model for people. We can't get better unless we talk about it. And these ideas have been hidden on purpose for a long time because the system doesn't want you to talk about them. And in this moment of change, I think we need to talk about it.
So that is why the book is structured in the way that it is. And then you also have the strategy deck, that is a deck card with these ideas that people can interact in a kinesthetic way with it.
Right. I'm a game designer in my spare time. So the way this works is there's 54 cards. You play four of them, any four, and you juxtapose them and you get to see four ideas next to each other. And there's 5 million combinations of four ideas. So every time you do it, it's going to be different. That's not how a book works, but that's how a deck can work. And it will prompt conversations among you and your peers. Oh, I see. What if we had to charge 10 times as much as we charge? What would we change? What if we had to make it free? What would we change? These things can juxtapose against each other and spark the next thing.
A thread that is emerging is this: we have the tools, we have the know-how, the technology to go really fast. So it's more important than ever to make sure that we are going in the direction that we want to go.
I love that. That's such a brilliant way to think about it. I was in a brainstorming session yesterday. There were 6 of us. One guy was very quiet. And every few minutes he would look up and he had already coded into the software the improvements we had just talked about 4 minutes earlier. That was impossible 10 years ago. Certainly inconceivable 20 years ago. And here it was happening live right before our eyes because you have $1 trillion machine helping you do it.
A lot of my work is on self-leadership and about the personal work. And one of the things, when I wrote my own book, I was wanting to come with something what I could teach in the book, and when I speak, that is easier, that people don't need a cheat sheet to go through, that will be helpful for them in their personal journey. And one of the things is we need to pause, increase our self-awareness, and then embrace experimentation. That was like my little framework. And that need to press the pause button was always important. It's not something new. I took that from between a stimulus and response. There is a space. In that space, it's the power to choose our response. In that power to choose our response is our grow and freedom. So this is Steve Covey has popularized this in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But is more important than ever. I find that this work is more important now than even before. Will you agree with that?
Yes. And the word I saw you use was breathe. And we don't think about breathing. We have to breathe. But in that moment, in between, that's when we are alive. That's when we have agency. That's when we're more than just an automaton. And thank you for giving people that breath, that chance to reset and get their mindset back.
I love that. And just to tie this to the beginning, because you were speaking about the importance of the systems, and this another thing that I love in the approach, the comprehensive approach that you have, because yes, we have to do. You spoke about the inner work, the importance of the inner work. Absolutely. You spoke that yesterday. You were speaking with a group of people, and you speak about this a lot. Also, the power of a team, and understanding that we don't live in the vacuum, we live in a system. And I think for the personal development, for unlocking our human potential, is a lot. At least we have to see things in these three levels. Yes, there individual work that we can do, absolutely. But us, we are connecting beings. Human beings are connecting beings. So the power, we can do more together than we can do alone. And we do not live in the vacuum. And I think a lot of your work on this strategy is being aware of this complexity.
Bingo. I don't have a roadmap. All I can offer is a compass. The work is for each of us to do. And you've been shining that light for a decade. It's a generous thing to offer other people, the trust that they can figure this out if they simply care enough to talk about it.
Love it. And your book is a way of knowing this compass that can guide us to build a better future.
That's the plan.
People can go and get your book wherever they buy their books. Following your blog, I will advise them. Any other ways, any other resources you want to point them to?
So I built a page at seths.blog/TIS, and you can find out about the collectible chocolate bar. You can find out about the strategy deck and other things. But mostly, I just want people to talk about it. That's why it's worth making a book.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the ruckus you make. I appreciate it.
Expanding possibilities, the mindset zone.
If you can think of a person who will find this episode helpful, please share it. Spreading the word about the Mindset Zone podcast is very powerful. For extra resources, including information about the book and audiobook, Mindset Zone, Actualize Your Human Potential, go to mindset.zone. Yes, instead of .com is .zone. As always, I'm so grateful that you are here. Expand what's possible for you, for the ones around you, for the world.